Okay, now that we've proved that we can issue tokens to our clients, let's take a look at how we can authenticate to our application. So we'll need to configure this, and what we need to do is configure this in our identity service extensions, and we're going to add some configuration to our services, add authentication. But we do need to install another package to get a particular set of types into our app. So we'll open up NuGet Gallery once again. And what we need here is Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.jwt bearer. This is the one we need, and we're going to add this to our API project, and we're going to install it. And then we can go back to our identity service extensions, and what we're going to do is configure this method to add authentication. Now we need to pass it the type of authentication we're using in the parameter here. So we're going to say JWT bearer defaults dot authentication scheme. And we'll need to bring in JWT bearer defaults from what we just added there, the Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication JWT bearer. And then below this, we'll remove the semicolon, and then we'll say add JWT bearer, and then we can pass this some options. And what we're going to do is say opt and pass in some token validation parameters. How do we want our API to validate that this token is valid? So what we'll do, we'll say opt token validation parameters, and then we'll say new token validation parameters. And we'll bring this in from Microsoft Identity Model.tokens. And inside here, we can say that we want to validate the issuer signing key. So this is that super secret key that we're adding to our token. We want our API to validate that this key is valid. So it's going to compare it with what we store on the server, i.e. super secret key, and it's going to use that to validate it. So we're going to set this flag to true. Otherwise, our token doesn't do anything. It'll just let anybody in with any kind of JWT token. We'll say that the issuer signing key, we need to tell our server about the key it needs to use, and what we'll do is we'll just create that key inside here. So we'll say var key equals new, and we'll say symmetric security key, and then we specify encoding, and we'll need to bring this in from system.text. We'll use UTF-8 just as we did in the token service, and we'll say get bytes, and we'll, for the time being, just hard code this in, and we'll say super secret key. Now this needs to be the same, of course, as what you used in the token service, and we will add this to our configuration soon, but just for now we'll just hard code it in here for our key, and then we'll tell our token validation parameters this is the key that we want to use. So if somebody sends up a token to our API that has a key that does not match what we're storing here, then they'll get an unauthorized back from our API. What we'll do next is we'll just set another couple of flags, and we'll say validate issuer, and we're just going to set this to false for now, and validate audience. Again, we're just going to set this to false. We're not implementing bulletproof security right now. We're just doing the easiest thing possible to check that we can authenticate to our API. And another thing that we need to do is we need to tell our application to use authentication. So we've got the service, but now we need to tell our API to use it. So we need to add the authentication middleware. So we're going to go to our startup class, and inside here, and ordering is essential at this point. We need our authentication to take place before our authorization. So this has to go just above it. So we're going to say app and use authentication. It's a very common mistake that students have made in the past is to mix up the ordering inside here and then never being able to authenticate to their application. And what we'll do just to test this very quickly is we'll open up our activities controller, and what we'll do is we'll just pick one of these endpoints and we'll tell it that we want to authenticate to it. So what we'll do just above the get activity, we're going to add an authorize attribute. So we're going to say authorize, and we'll bring in using Microsoft ASP.NET Core authorization. Now by default, all of these endpoints are going to be allowed anonymous access, apart from the one where we've explicitly set we want this to be an authorized request, and that's just for our get activity. So if we go to Postman, and let's take a look. We've got a request here to get activities with no authentication. And this is just as we've been doing it before. There's nothing additional here. It's just a normal GET request to our activities endpoint. This one should work. And if I click send, we get our list of activities back. Great. The next one, well, let's get one of our activity IDs first of all into the clipboard. So I'm just going to copy the top one, past activity 11 in my case. And I'm going to go to the get activity with no auth and paste in the GUID of that particular activity. Now we've set authentication on this one now. So what we should get back is a 401 unauthorized because we're not sending up our token with this request. And if we click send, then sure, we get a 401 unauthorized. So let's now try and get that same activity, but this time we're going to send up our token. So we'll click on this third request, get activity with auth, and I'm just going to paste in the correct GUID of the activity we were just looking at. And inside the headers this time, we've got an authorization header. And the way that we send up a JWT token is we specify bearer, then we have a space, and then we paste in the token, or we pass up the token. So I'm just going to go back to my login user successful request. I'll just click on send again to get a new token. I'm going to copy the token into my clipboard, the whole thing, and then I'm going to go back to the get activity with auth, and I'm just going to overwrite what we have inside here for the bearer token. And then we can click send, and this time we get our activity back. Because we are sending up the bearer token with this request, we're authenticating to our API, and it sends us back the token. Perfect. And what we'll take a look at next is what we're doing with our key that we're using to sign our tokens, and we'll take a look at that next.